As you heard, Preet did a fairly large-scale action project. She had several teachers involved, and she also had research assistants for 9 months, 2 research assistants for 9 months to employ. But what if you don't have those same kinds of fundings or that same kind of time available? How can you do action research on a low budget? Right. You can do it thriftily, especially if you're just doing it for your own purposes and not so much to formally publish. You don't have to be quite so rigorous. Here's some suggestions for you. Choose one section of a small class, right? Just do one section. Otherwise, the data analysis can become overwhelming. Another idea is to do a triangulation with simpler tools, for instance, using a checklist kind of questionnaire rather than interviews, which would take a lot longer. Or I've termed a new phrase, I think, biangulation rather than triangulation. Just use 2 ways of checking your data. Then also, you can plan the timing of your task around your curriculum. Preet, you saw the chart before where she did it in weeks 3, 4, and then the next 3 cycles were in weeks 9, 10, and 11. That was partly because that was when that intended learning outcome was being taught, and that was when those tasks, production tasks, were going to be scheduled anyway. So that meant she already had a task that was scheduled that could be used as feedback to determine whether her actions were successful or not. So if you time it in with your curriculum, you can also double up on some of the work. Okay. Now, if all of your students have some kind of internet device in the class, or if you're willing to take them to the lab every now and then you can actually save a lot of excess paperwork by using the online CTLE questions. There's one section in the online CTLE for 1-minute paper questions, which are basically the kinds of questions aimed at being used in this kind of classroom-based action research. Or you can use student helpers. They can do the admin work, collection, collation of the results. Even they can do some of the initial data analysis for you for only $50 an hour. Or you can collaborate in pairs or teams. Preet also had the benefit of collaboration. So that was why they were actually able to address all the intended learning outcomes of their course. Whereas normally if one teacher researcher is doing an action research project, it would be impossible to do all the learning outcomes of a course. You just pick 1 or 2 at the most. So you can also help each other to research the relevant literature or collect the data, all the different phases you can share. Right, one more idea too on how to improve your teaching with no programs and no extra resources, and without having to go through the whole rigor of all the phases of an action research project. You can do something simpler, which we're calling reflective teaching. Okay. You can see Mark Lebain about this because he has done a project on reflective teaching, and he's also done some talks on it, given some workshops on it before. So if you're interested in this, I recommend that you talk to Mark Lebain afterwards. Reflective teaching is a process of developing lessons or assessing student learning with thoughtful consideration of educational theory, existing research, and practical experience, along with the analysis of the lesson's effect on student learning. So it's kind of a simpler form of an action research idea. Now, I think we'll just continue here. On to publishing action research. If you want to publish action research formally, then here are basically the criteria, very similar to publishing academic research. It must be generalizable. You must have done a literature search first on actually 3 areas. Action research involves 3 areas. Whatever your specific topic is that you're researching. Plus, you need to know about methods of obtaining student feedback, such as on that sheet there, and teaching techniques that you're going to apply in your action plan part of your phase. Your research will be more credible if it's gone through several cycles of prolonged engagement and persistent observation. It will also be more credible if it's done or facilitated by an experienced action researcher. And if data is triangulated, then accuracy can be cross-checked. And also, as I mentioned before, there are action research journals. In Mertler, the work I mentioned before, he actually lists several pages of action research journals. Plus there are some discipline-specific journals that now have columns for action research articles as well. So that's a possibility. Now, why share your results? So, if you're doing it for your own benefit, there are several reasons that I would recommend that you share your results in some form, whether it's formally or informally. Firstly, because the very process of sharing or publishing or formally writing out your results fosters further reflection on both the topic of your study plus the whole process of action research. So if you're going to continue doing action research, that's going to be especially helpful to you. And it's also been noted that it's very important in a liberal arts context to create an environment where people will take responsibility for their own teaching. Secondly, sharing your results promotes knowledge transfer of new or improved teaching techniques plus the process of action research. And also it bridges the gap between research and practice, because there tends to be a unidirectional flow from the research into the classroom, not from the classroom back into research. So consequently, what goes on in the classroom often does not really reflect research findings, because the teachers will find it too theoretical and it doesn't take into account the teacher's points of view or the complexities of the teaching learning process or the practical challenges that teachers need to face on a day-by-day basis. But publishing action research creates a two-way flow of information. It's like the teacher-researcher becomes the missing link, or the gap between the theoretical researchers and the actual practicing educators. So data collected and analysed by practicing teachers in their own classrooms can then be turned around and used to inform theories and researches related to best practices. And my suggestion is, if you have found your topic or the problem in your classroom so important that you've conducted action research into it, for sure there will be other teachers in similar situations who will benefit from sharing your findings. So even if you don't publish formally, at the least share your action research with your departmental or your faculty colleagues in a workshop or something like that. Okay, if you are interested in doing some action research or finding out more about it, we have here at the bottom one recommended resource, which is kind of like an action research for dummies. This one on the bottom is it's an online booklet, which we'll highly recommend. It would really get you started. And as I explained before, there are quite a few books in our book repository on action research as well that will take you through the whole cycle of it. So now we have some time for questions and answers.
I guess I have a couple of questions, probably for Preet. I think it's interesting that you had many teachers. And were you one of the teachers? Or
Yes, I was one of the teachers, yes.
And so my thought has always been teaching is a very individualistic thing. So a thing that might work for you might not work for someone else.
Yes.
Did you see that different teachers branched off in different directions?
Yes, yes, exactly. So the only time that we actually collaborated was because we did one course. I mean, all of us were teaching the same course. The problems that each teacher faced was different because it was based on their set of students. And the consequent action or the strategy that she would take to address that problem would be different, which is why we had, where's it? Yeah, that's fine. 1, 2, 3, 4. So probably more than these actually. These are just few of them. But then each teacher did something different in her class to make sure that students actually get that point. So yes, to answer your question, yes, it's very individualistic in that sense, in terms of because you know your class best, you know what works with your students best, and it's up to you how you do it. The only common ground that we all had was we all had the same outcomes. We all knew more or less in week 3 and 4 what topic we are going to teach, but the problems that the students faced may be different for different teachers.
Were there some emergent? Were there some? I guess the other thing is, so it's clear this is a pain in the neck to do the action research compared to thinking about it. So I think anybody that's in this room is probably here because they care about teaching and they reflect about their teaching.
Yes, yes.
And so,
yes.
do you think that you came up with insights because of the rigor of the project that you would not have come up with on your own, just kind of thinking about it as you're walking back and forth to class?
Yes, when we're walking back and forth to classes, yes, the rigor is important in the project. Yeah, that's true. I mean, we know, like I said in the beginning, we know intuitively that probably students are struggling with one aspect. How do we get to working around that? And I think we also had a lot of discussions, and over a period of time, we've kind of worked on improving the course or changing different aspects of the course based on our understanding. But this rigor helped us to get a much more insight into the course and making it a better.
Yeah, I think it's the collaborative aspect of action research, if you like, that we brought that out. If it's just talking about it on the way back from class, probably, okay, we know that it's gone. Here, it's more likely to get fixed into procedures, documents, as you saw. We then sat down and reviewed the outcomes.
Yeah.
So it's probably more likely to happen.
Can I just add something to that? Because I want to go back to that slide about the outcomes, wherever that was.
The outcomes. Oh,
Yeah.
Let's see.
Right, okay, yeah. Because you can see here the learning outcomes. These were the original learning outcomes when OBE first came in, which stood for 4 years, 2011 to 2015, with teachers doing the regular
That's right.
4 years.
Yes,
Yes, yes.
there may be minor changes.
Yeah. So basically those stood there for 4 years, but when they did the action research project in 2015 to 16, they realised that they needed to be radically changed. So that was the result of the action research project. The 4 years before with the usual teaching process hadn't produced that kind of change. Yeah.
Okay.
Preet,
Yes.
thank you for the enthusiasm you generate with your obvious love of teaching. I noticed you used the F word quite a few times during your presentation. Feedback. It came up in our discussions at our table a number of times, and I noticed it was sort of addressed over here as well. I'd be interested in your comments on, we talk a lot about feedback to peers and feedback from people. I'd be interested in your thoughts on the skill set of the provider of the feedback and the attitude of the recipient of the feedback. It seems to be something that popped up in our discussions quite a bit, and I'll be interested in your thoughts and reflections on that.
For the first time that I used the F word, the feedback was feedback from students to the teacher, which is obviously, like we all know that students are they're not vocal. When we ask them something in class, they tend to be very quiet.
They are very vocal. I think they are very vocal. The learning students are very vocal. Just look around the campus.
Yeah.
If you're the president, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So to come back to your question in terms of getting feedback from students in different ways was important for us to understand how we address those problems, because we wouldn't have been able to address, like what Andrew said, we wouldn't have been able to address the problems had we not found those problems out systematically or in an organized way. And students also do notice that, okay, the teacher is actually taking the pains or the effort to address my problem. So say for example in the class, if the teacher is asking the student to answer a question or say, okay, come here and give a 1-minute presentation, and then she immediately points out the errors at that point in time, the students actually appreciate it. Like what Steve said, that students really appreciate feedback. They just, whether it is on our e-portfolios or whether it is on any form. So in terms of the recipient, if you're talking about the student as the recipient of feedback, obviously they do, they just like it. The more the better. Does that answer your question, or you're also asking about the teacher?
I've got about 8 more based on what you said, but I might get back to you about that.
Yeah.
Can I ask a second question? The issue of student engagement was obviously one that's popped up quite a bit, and the use of, was there any use around self-assessment? I know there's lots of work done on these fabulous rubrics. And I see them as quite an empowering tool for both the teacher and also the learner. Was there any use of
The rubrics?
self-assessment with the rubrics and
Yes.
their own reflective, and to consider that, which may, go to somewhat to addressing the concern you raised originally.
Yes, when we looked at students' work, we actually used the rubrics to evaluate that work. So although those rubrics were for the formal assessments or the formal assignments, but the students' work were more or less in line with the assignments that they would have. So if the assignment is like analyze the entire text, the particular task that the teacher would say, okay, just analyze the structure and write 100 words for that or whatever, 50 words for that. And then it would be assessed based on that rubric. So
Do the students engage with the rubric?
yes,
So that there's this kind of management of
yes,
expectation?
exactly, yes, they do, they do, yes, they do, yes.
Is that powerful? Is that a useful strategy?
Yes, because students know what they're expected to do. I mean, as long as they know what they're expected to do, they'll work towards achieving that. So it's important that they know what the rubric is and they are familiarized with the rubric. Yeah. Yes.
I have a kind of a technical question. I'm just wondering, maybe in a week, how much time are you devoting to this? How much of that actual kind of teaching time are you shifting over to this feedback time?
Like I said, I had these research assistants with me, so they were doing all the collection of the data. In terms of practical times, they would meet with the teacher once a week at the end of the week. So after she's finished her 2 lessons in the class, they would spend, I think, half an hour, 45 minutes with the teacher in a week. So yeah, it is.
What about these? You were saying each student did these journals and these.
Reflective journals usually were handed out after the end of the lesson. At the end of the lesson, 5 to 10 minutes
This is
maximum.
every class period, or once a week, or
For those cycles, so that's it.
maybe
Yeah,
5 times.
5 times. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
I was just thinking about just
Yes,
balance
yeah, I know
it
that's
time.
because it can be quite time consuming if you have to do it entirely on your own. Yes.
Actually, Steve and I may have the same question about, we're using sectional approach in the Faculty of Business. We don't have lecture tutorial.
Right.
Basically, it's lecture times.
Mm.
So we do have a common syllabus, like we have a lot of constraints like ASSB, and we have a lot of core courses basically follow the same continuous assessment schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So it will be very difficult, like 5 times, even maybe once a week. I think it's quite physical. I mean, in terms of time, it's very difficult for us to allocate the time.
Yeah, so that's why we, if it is a sectional one, that's why we say that it start on a very, very small scale. So like, for example, I did it only for 1 section, even if I teach 3 sections. But like if we have like 25 sections, all 25 sections.
So we cannot do in 1 section, but not on the other ones, because we have to be consistent to do the same thing.
Yes, that's true.
So we have
But
the
this
same,
is but this is actually because you're exploring and you are trying to see what works with students. So it's probably you do it in 1 section, and then in the next year you can apply that in the other section. So basically, what you're doing, because the assumption is that if these students are having this particular problem, probably because you're the same teacher who's teaching that particular other section, so you know that, oh, this is where I could improve on the course, or I could improve in terms of how I deliver the course or the materials. So I mean, we would recommend, because even our other teachers, they did it only for 1 section, although they were teaching 4. So they did it only for 1 particular section. If you want to do it in a very systematic, research-oriented manner, the only application of this finding would be done once the research project is over. So that now I know that, okay, when I'm teaching this particular topic, I must apply this particular strategy to make sure that students are more comfortable with this concept. So yeah, you can't do it with all sections. It's just
No, I mean, that may be a potential problem, that why I have to, for example, the student will ask surface learning, the same thing. Why I have to do surface learning in 1 section and, the others? They don't want to do it, maybe. So I mean, one of the section will ask, why we have to spend time on this, but the other section does not have? to spend time on this. We have to have fair evaluation, and they will say the same thing about why this section has to do a project and the other section. When we are doing the grade, at the end of the semester, we have to curve the student, grade the students the same way.
Because this is not affecting the assignment.
No, I mean the timing.
It's only 5-10 minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
But then you have to commit the time.
No, actually, one of our teachers actually she gave a briefing to the students and said that, okay, this is what we're going to do. Are you willing to do it? So she actually asked students if they want to participate in this particular.
But if you have to do it, and for example, I'm teaching a core course for finance students. They have to take that course regardless, and they have to take a course. But you are doing that with them.
Mm-hmm.
They have no choice to withdraw because they have to take that course for graduation.
Right.
And
But it
we're
is
not
for their
giving them
betterment.
a
I mean,
choice,
the whole point is like we are getting them to understand this is for your betterment. I mean, we are collecting feedback for you so that we can help you learn. So the whole point is about how you bring it across to the students in terms of, oh, here we are, let's make this interesting, let's do this. in this
We always say that we are doing things benefiting them, but
Yes.
the student may think differently. We have to be realistic about this.
As I understand, Preet was doing it on a core course as well, and some of the teachers on the core course were doing this action research project. Other teachers on the same core course weren't, but I don't think you had any issues with the students. Yeah.
I think the faculty of business may have it quite different from this. Even for grading exam, sometimes for the core course, we have to grade the same question by one teacher all the way for all the examination script. So it's quite different.
Okay,
I think
thank you.
I mean, there are differences among faculties, I would say.
Yeah, I think we're kind of out of time
Can I
right
just
now.
make
Yes,
a
sure.
statement?
Sure.
Whilst, sorry, I don't want to sort of usurp. I'm going to make a statement, if I could, but I just want to put this in context. I think to answer Winnie's point, it's all about how you communicate. How you communicate this to them. This is, it may be inconvenient, or it may be perceived so, but it's how you communicate to them. And there's nothing you can do with students who may be negatively disposed. You're going to have to live with that. So if you want to do it, you've got to live with that. I think the second thing I want to make, and this is the most important point, is this. Is this an important thing to do? Or is it just a nice but not necessary? And I can tell you from the briefing that we had on Friday, it's a critical thing to do. Because the drilling down aspect of Lingnan in the QAC audit is all about student achievement. And they're saying to us now, we want to know that, the learning outcomes, are the right level, an appropriate level, and we want to know that they're assessed in an appropriate way, and we want to gather all people around who are going to talk to us about student achievement. To me, this is absolutely mainline to that, because they weren't satisfied. I can say they weren't totally satisfied. We gave all sorts of answers, which I thought were reasonable answers, like, for example, when you start a program, how do you know it's at the right level? And we went through all the planning process, and we said we have an external validators who do it. But but the external people are then telling you, are they, about your stand? We had those type of arguments. This is mainline, that we are actually engaging the students in the development of learning outcomes and everything that entails. So I don't think, I want you to know that it is an important area. So I just want to reinforce that. Okay, so.